She barely registered the sound of her own breathing, shallow, ragged, like wind leaking through cracked glass. The world was aflame. Smoke slithered through the broken trees, weaving between shattered shuttle parts and chunks of scorched alloy. The soil beneath her body steamed with heat. Somewhere above, the twin moons of Zura 9 flickered in and out of view, their pale light suffocated by ash and fire. Lyra had long stopped trying to stand. One leg was useless, plasma burned down to the bone. Her side felt like it had been kissed by a meteor. She blinked slowly, her long, pointed ears twitching once as they filtered distant sound. Distant shouting, metal grinding, something thudding closer through the wreckage. She hoped it was death. Death had a good sense of timing. Her fingers twitched toward her sidearm. Gone. Of course. The last thing she remembered was calling for evac, and the answer being silence. Her people had left. Retreat protocol. A clean extraction. She wasn't on the list. Not anymore. With effort, she turned her head. Fire danced along the wrecked hull of the scout transport, casting eerie shadows on the cracked glass dome nearby. Through it, something moved. Not sleek and tall like a Corellan, not wide and lumbering like the Ixor hounds that fed on the dying. Two boots crunched toward her, mismatched armor, human issue, dirt-caked. The figure was hunched, limping slightly, holding something shaped like a ridiculously outdated rifle. She let out a weak hiss. Of all the things to find her, why him? The man crouched beside her, visor reflecting the flickering firelight. "You look terrible," he said, voice distorted slightly by a calm crackle. "But hey, so do I." She blinked, unimpressed. He removed his helmet. Human male. Mid-30s probably. Messy dark hair, smudged face. Eyes that looked too awake for someone this deep into enemy territory. "Name's Elias. I'd shake your hand, but yours looks kinda crispy." She tried to speak, but only blood came out. He rummaged in his bag, pulled out something that looked like a protein bar fused with industrial sealant. "No offense, but you're leaking more than a broken coolant pipe. You eat this or I shove it in your mouth. Doctor's orders." He wasn't a doctor. He didn't look like he'd passed any form of training, and yet here he was, kneeling in the mud next to an enemy, trying to save her life with sass and a suspicious-looking snack. "Why?" she croaked finally, the word warping through cracked lips. Her translator implant flickered to life with a spark. He paused. The grin slipped. "Because no one else did," he said simply, reaching under her shoulders. "Now shut up, or I'll start singing. And I warn you, my rendition of Space Cowboy Blues has started wars." She wasn't light, not with armor, not with the dead weight of betrayal, but he carried her anyway, stumbling, swearing, cracking jokes under his breath like they were the only fuel he had left. Each step away from the crash site felt like a rebellion against logic, against protocol, against everything their species had drilled into them. When she slipped into unconsciousness again, the last thing she felt wasn't fear. It was the faint, rhythmic thump of a human heartbeat, close to her own, steady in the smoke. And in that absurd, painful moment, she realized she might not die after all, which was, frankly, very inconvenient. Lyra awoke to the scent of something burnt, and it wasn't her. That was new. Her eyelids peeled back with effort, revealing a curved ceiling overhead, cracked and patched with bits of reflective foil. Dim green lights pulsed weakly from a generator that sounded like it was having an existential crisis. Around her, the remnants of a human recon shelter had been repurposed into a makeshift med bay, or more accurately, a garbage fort pretending to be one. "You're alive," came Elias's voice from nearby. "That ruins my dramatic monologue." She turned her head slowly. He was crouched at a workbench made of crate lids and bent piping, tinkering with a gadget that sparked more than it functioned. His jacket hung off one shoulder like it had given up trying to be useful. A mug steamed beside him, some sort of brew that smelled like melted rubber and regret. "Where?" she murmured. "Safe. For now." "Welcome to Fort Questionable Decisions," he said, gesturing grandly to the tiny shelter. "Population? Yes. Amenities include a broken heater, one med kit with half a bandage, and a charming host who definitely knows what he's doing." She grunted, somewhere between amusement and despair. "Okay, maybe safe is a strong word. Elias admitted, rising and bringing her a small canister. Water. Sort of. Don't ask how I filtered it. I'll just say the socks are clean now. Her fingers closed around the canister. Her strength was returning slowly like a reluctant sunrise. The burns across her side had been dressed with a mixture of human gel and Corellan nanofoam. His doing, clearly. The combination shouldn't have worked, but it had. Why didn't you leave? She asked, the translator implant making her words sound smoother now. Elias scratched his head. I thought about it, but then you made this really dramatic death face, and I figured, nah, can't let her go out like that. Besides, I already stole your translator tech. Might as well stick around and learn how to say something cool in Corellan. Like what? I don't know, something like, I come in peace mostly. Or, sorry I stepped on your ceremonial egg bowl. Lyra gave the tiniest smile. It hurt, but it happened. Elias sat beside her, his boots scraping against the floor. We're about 5 clicks from where your shuttle went kaboom. Still lots of patrols sniffing around, but the drones haven't pinged us yet. I've got a signal scrambler running on that battery over there. Works fine as long as you don't breathe near it. She shifted, groaning. Her long ears twitched, picking up the faint hum of scanning pulses in the distance. They'll find us eventually. Yeah, Elias said, sipping from his questionable mug. But not today. And tomorrow's a whole different problem. Right now, we get you mobile again. You plan to carry me across 5 clicks of hostile terrain with what? Your charm? I was thinking more like that half-busted hover pad outside, he said. I've been fixing it with chewing gum and hope. Pretty sure it'll explode on takeoff, but that's part of the thrill. She studied him a moment. His face wasn't like Corellan men, softer in some ways, but stubborn where it counted. Humans were strange creatures, loud, improvised, full of contradictions. Yet there he was, risking his life to nurse an enemy, back to health using scraps, jokes, and sheer irrational willpower. You're not what I expected, she murmured. Elias raised a brow. What did you expect? A soldier, cold, efficient, dangerous. Oh, I'm plenty dangerous, he said, flexing his bicep, which produced exactly 0 visible muscle. Just ask my old gym instructor. She exhaled, almost a laugh. Almost. Outside, the wind shifted. The forest beyond the wreckage sighed like a beast sleeping with one eye open. The war still burned elsewhere. But here, for the briefest moment, there was quiet. Rest, Elias said, adjusting the scrap blanket around her. I'll watch the scrambler, and maybe reheat the rations. They're only partly radioactive. She didn't argue. Her eyelids dropped again, not in pain this time, but in peace. And somewhere in the background, Elias began humming off-key. A human tune. It was terrible, but it was hers now too. The 3rd day in the rec shelter began with a bang. Literally. A small explosion sent a plume of green smoke through the corner of the shelter, followed by a string of very colorful human words and the unmistakable clatter of tools hitting the floor. Lyra sat up with effort, wincing at the pull in her ribs. Her wounds were healing faster now, thanks to the makeshift hybrid gel Elias kept calling miracle goo with far too much enthusiasm. Her muscles still ached, but at least she could walk again. Stagger at least, and frown, which she did generously every time Elias attempted engineering. Elias emerged from the smoke, coughing, his eyebrows slightly singed. Okay, so note to self, Corellan power cells and Earth batteries don't like each other. In fact, they loathe each other. I may have just started an interspecies battery war. She tilted her head. Why were you combining power cells? To make coffee. He held up a scorched cup. Success rate, 0. Explosion rate, higher than I'd like to admit. Despite herself, she chuckled. It made her side hurt again, but she didn't mind. Not as much as before. He grinned at her laugh and gestured toward the clearing outside. Come on, you need air. I need less smoke in my lungs. Let's hobble out together. The forest had begun to reclaim the crash zone. Vines climbed over shattered hull plates. Strange blue moss shimmered faintly across rocks like frost. The alien moonlight filtered through pale leaves that responded to their steps by curling inward. Zura 9's ecosystem was adaptive, reactive. If you stayed still long enough, the trees would probably try to give you unsolicited life advice. They found a spot where a section of their shuttle had crumpled into a natural arch, forming a kind of half-cave. Elias had cleared out a bench-shaped piece of metal and even set up a line of string with tin scraps, which he proudly called a security alarm. When she asked if it worked, he answered, "It sings a little if someone walks through it." Technically, that's an alarm. As they sat in the clearing, Elias pulled out a cracked datapad. "Found something you might want to see?" He tapped the screen until a fuzzy image stabilized. It was a message, distorted by planetary interference, but clearly meant for her. A female voice spoke in hurried Kirilan, the background full of static and distant shouting. Lyra's back straightened. "That's my sister, Nira." "Didn't know you had one," Elias said, watching her carefully. Lyra hesitated. "She's command now. High rank. Tactical specialist. Cold like a ship's hull, but loyal." The message flickered again. "If you're alive, we are coming. Signal the beacon. Coordinates locked. Hold on." Then silence. Elias set the pad down between them. "Looks like the cavalry's on its way. That's good, right?" She didn't answer right away. Her eyes searched the treetops like the answer might be written in glowing leaves. "I'm not sure," she finally whispered. Elias gave her space, filling with his multi-tool and humming something she suspected was meant to be calming, but sounded more like a dying drone. "You know," he said after a pause, "if your people are anything like mine, showing up too late is sort of a tradition, like arriving to a party after all the good snacks are gone." She eyed him. "This is a rescue, not a party." "Could be both," he said with a wink. "I brought the snacks." She shook her head slowly, ears twitching with the motion. "You joke so much. Why?" "Because Sirius gets heavy," he replied, "and we're already carrying enough weight as it is." She stared at him for a moment longer. Not as an enemy, not even as an oddity, just as a man who had chosen to stay when he could have run. Back in the shelter, they worked in companionable silence. Lyra helped patch a hole in the roof with scavenged paneling, and Elias reworked the failed power unit using the least flammable materials available. Mostly string, plastic, and overconfidence. Later that night, as the stars blinked to life overhead, Lyra whispered, almost too soft for her translator to catch, "Thank you for not letting me die." Elias looked up from his tangled wires, eyes glinting. "Don't thank me yet. Wait until I burn this whole place down trying to make toast again." She didn't smile, but she didn't stop him either. The fourth morning arrived with an eerie silence. No birds, no rustling trees, no crackling from the half-dead campfire Elias had spent an hour proudly constructing out of emotionally unstable sticks. Even the moss seemed to hold its breath. Lyra crouched low near the entrance of the shelter, her long ears angled toward the forest like tuning forks. Her eyes scanned the mist that curled between the trunks, silver strands drifting unnaturally. That wasn't natural fog. It was dispersal mist from a recon-class drone, high-altitude type, cloaked, efficient, ruthless. "They're back," she said quietly. Elias didn't panic. He just chewed his last bite of protein bar, vanilla tar flavored apparently, and leaned over her shoulder, squinting through the trees. "So, good back or bad back?" "Very bad back." "Well, that answers that. Time to execute plan. Actually, what plan are we on now?" "I stopped counting after plan G." Elias nodded. "Right, this must be plan H. H for hide and hope the drones are emotionally distracted." Despite herself, Lyra grinned as she activated her scanner. The readings were clear. 2 drones circling wide, triangulating signals. The signal scrambler was weakening. Elias's bubble of invisibility had been held together by duct tape, sarcasm, and one old harmonica he swore was critical to the circuit. "Help me reroute the feed through the hull mesh," she said, moving fast now. Her strength had mostly returned, though a limp still slowed her. Elias followed without question, rummaging through wires while muttering war chants to himself like, "Come on, you glorious piece of junk! Don't betray me now." As they worked, something caught her attention, a flicker in the corner of her vision. The old Kirilan distress beacon, which she had refused to activate until now, suddenly blinked to life. Autonomous trigger, proximity override, meaning someone from her species had come within 40 meters. She hissed and dove for the module, deactivating it in a flurry of fingers. They're here, my people. Ground scouts. Oh, good. Wait, that's not good, is it? Number, if they find me with you, they won't ask questions. They'll just assume that I'm holding you hostage. Or worse, corrupting your noble alien morals with bad jokes and human cooking. Exactly. For a beat, they stared at each other. The air pulsed with distant drone wings. The forest held its hush. Elias stood and grabbed his pack. All right, I'll go. Lyra blinked. What? I'll draw the drones. Lead them away from here. You stay hidden. Signal your people once I'm out of range. Boom. Happy ending. That's not a plan. That's... She stopped. He was already wrapping a strip of bright thermal tape to his chest. They'll see you from orbit. Perfect. That's the idea. He adjusted his helmet, still dented from his previous attempt at tactical rolling. Lyra grabbed his arm. You'll die. He looked at her with that maddening calm again. Maybe, but you won't. And I kind of like the idea of one of us making it out of this dumb forest. She hesitated, and then, without fully understanding why, she unclipped her personal beacon, a slim, elegant device shaped like a crescent, and pressed it into his hand. If you're doing this, then take this. It'll emit a pulse every 30 seconds. Lead them west. The terrain's jagged. Drones hate uneven footing. He stared at the beacon, then at her. You sure? I'm not sure about anything anymore, except that if you sing while you run, I will find you and shoot you myself. He grinned. No promises. Moments later, he vanished into the mist, beacon pulsing faintly in hand, his silhouette shrinking as the trees swallowed him. And Lyra remained behind, heart hammering, pulse sinking, not with fear, but with the impossible rhythm of someone who should have been a stranger, but wasn't. The forest was silent again, but this time it wasn't peaceful. It was the kind of silence that held its breath, waiting to see if someone, would return from the other side of the tree line. Lyra stood alone in the shadow of their makeshift shelter, pulse still thrumming from the moment Elias had disappeared into the mist. The beacon she'd given him still pulsed on her scanner, a soft, rhythmic ping moving westward just as planned. So far, the drones were following. So far, he was alive. She paced, ears twitching at every twig snap, every rustle of leaves. Part of her wanted to activate the beacon again, to call in her people, to end this game of shadows once and for all. But another part, the louder, more stubborn part, told her to wait. Just a little longer. For him. She busied herself with repairs. The power relay was fried again. The harmonica-based signal scrambler had melted into a very creative shape. She muttered in Kirellan as she stripped wires and redirected power through an old medical scanner. Improvised circuitry hummed to life. Primitive tool, she whispered to herself, held together by chaos and blind luck. Still, it worked. Hours passed. The sky above shifted from pale silver to twilight mauve. She monitored the drones, watched them drift further west, until their signals finally vanished into interference. But the beacon signal, that little rhythmic pulse, stopped too. Lyra froze. Her fingers flew across the scanner's interface, adjusting frequencies, boosting the range, overriding safeguards. No signal, no ping, no Elias. 1,000 possibilities screamed through her thoughts. Captured, killed. Or maybe, just maybe, the beacon had broken. Knowing Elias, that was highly possible. He could ruin a transmitter just by looking at it funny. But still, without wasting another second, she grabbed her weapon, half charged but functional, and slung a satchel of supplies over her shoulder. Her limp was barely noticeable now. Pain was irrelevant. She headed west. The forest grew denser as she moved, the air thicker with bioluminescent pollen that clung to her skin like static. Trees twisted into unnatural shapes, reacting subtly to her presence. Once she heard movement ahead, then saw it. A drone, collapsed and short-circuited, fried from the inside. She approached with caution. Its internal systems had been overloaded by a concentrated power burst, human in origin, the beacon's pulse generator, so he had used it to disable the drone. Brilliant, suicidal, So very him. A trail of broken foliage led beyond the drone, into a narrow pass carved by ancient water. She followed it, heartbeat rising, every sense alert. And then, finally, she found him. Elias was slumped against a moss-covered boulder, one hand over his side where blood had darkened his jacket. His other hand still clutched the beacon's remains, charred and cracked, its last pulse long dead. His eyes opened slowly. "Hey," he rasped, voice dry. "Either I'm hallucinating or you look incredibly angry to see me." "I am," she said, dropping beside him, "because you're alive, and that means I have to yell at you instead of mourn." He smiled, teeth stained red. "Knew you'd miss my jokes." She pulled out a stim injector and pressed it into his neck. He winced, but the color started to return to his face. "You're lucky," she muttered. "If that drone had aimed 2 centimeters higher, I'd be dragging a corpse instead of a sarcastic idiot." Elias blinked. "Oh, you do care." She rolled her eyes, but the relief that swept through her was so intense it almost knocked her sideways. "You shouldn't have gone alone. You'd have done the same." "Yes," she admitted, "but I would have done it with less flair and fewer bad decisions." He chuckled weakly. "You've really grown attached to me, huh?" She glanced at him. I'm just too tired to train another human." The stars blinked into view overhead, distant and cold, watching the 2 figures huddled in the dark. Around them, the forest pulsed with quiet life. And within that silence, something had changed. Not just the shape of their survival, but the bond that had formed between 2 lost souls who were never supposed to meet. She helped him stand, arm over her shoulder. "Let's get back," she said. "To the burning shelter with the toxic coffee machine?" "Yep," she said. "It's home now." They returned to the shelter just before dawn, half limping, half laughing, one leaning into the other like 2 halves of a busted shuttle, barely keeping altitude. Lyra's arm stayed firm around Elias's waist, even as he mumbled something about getting a badge for most dramatic injury sustained while being noble and dumb. Once inside, she guided him to the bench and immediately began assembling the medical tools. Her hands moved with purpose now, faster, surer. She no longer hesitated at human anatomy or hesitated with hybrid mixtures. She had learned, adapted, just like him. Elias grunted as she peeled away the torn jacket. "I really like that coat." "It was horrible," she replied. "You looked like a wandering carpet merchant." "Stylish," he corrected. "Rugged." She didn't reply. The wound along his ribs was nasty. Plasma grazed but deep. The drone had come closer than either of them realized. "I'm fine," he offered, watching her face twist into concentration. "Just a little smoldering." "Shut up." He obeyed. The field foam hissed as she applied it, the nano agents fusing into his skin, rebuilding muscle layer by layer. He winced but made no sound. By the time she was done, the sun had begun to rise, soft orange glow creeping through the cracks in the shelter walls. The world outside was still in ruins. The trees whispered with the promise of violence. But inside there was a moment of peace. He sat up with a groan. "I've been thinking. That's dangerous. Hear me out. Your sister's message said extraction is possible, right? That they're nearby?" Lyra nodded slowly. "Yes. They've probably landed by now. Scout teams, small transport units." "So," he said, squinting as if choosing his words, "what happens when they find us?" "Because I'm not exactly on their guest list." "They'll see you as a threat," she said, then added more softly, "even if I say otherwise." Elias leaned back against the wall, eyes on the ceiling. "What if I go first? Find them before they find us. Talk to them. Do my whole charming idiot routine." "You'll be shot." "Yeah, but maybe not right away." She frowned. "That's not a plan. That's a death wish with a clever title." He smiled, but his eyes were serious. "I don't want to be the reason they shoot at you." "You're not." "I might be." Lyra stood and walked to the open hatch, arms crossed, ears twitching with each movement of the forest beyond. She hated this. She hated that she didn't have a clean solution, a perfect escape route, a clever answer to what came next. All she knew was that she didn't want to leave him, and she didn't want him to leave her. "There's another option," she said finally, "which is We fake your surrender. He blinked. That's, oddly specific. You've thought about this? Since the first time you nearly blew up our water filter, yes. Wow, I'm honored. She turned to face him, her tone sharpening. We rig a beacon. Send a distress call from a captured human. They'll come fast, expecting a prisoner. You're shackled, disarmed, looking pathetic. I explained that you were informative, non-hostile, cooperative. Elias scratched his chin. So me, but more pitiful. Exactly. And you trust your sister not to shoot first? I trust her to listen. If she doesn't, I'll throw her off the ship myself. His eyebrows lifted. Family bonding, I like it. They spent the rest of the day building the trap. It wasn't elegant, but it was convincing. An old escape pod became the cell, complete with false scorch marks. They built restraints out of spare wiring, and Elias practiced looking tragically heroic. You know, he said as she clicked a shackle around his wrist, I didn't think I'd end up as a space damsel in distress. But here we are. Lyra paused, looking him over. You make it work. He grinned, but beneath it, he looked scared. Not of pain, not of her people, but of what came next. So was she. She leaned in, just for a second, her forehead touching his. If this goes wrong, it won't, he whispered. But if it does, then I'll haunt your ship, sing loudly in your dreams. She chuckled. That would be the worst punishment imaginable. Outside, a low hum filled the sky. Engines, growing louder. They were coming. The sky trembled as the scout ship descended. Its twin thrusters sent a pulse through the soil, making the moss shimmer and the trees recoil in ripples. A beam of amber light cut down through the clearing, illuminating the broken pod where Elias sat shackled, smeared with ash and dirt, arms deliberately slack in surrender. Lyra stood just beyond the glow, her stance calm, authoritative. Her armor had been hastily cleaned, her crest reattached over her shoulder like a declaration. Corellan officer, rank undisputed. And yet her heart beat in defiance of the uniform she wore. The transport door opened with a hiss, and 6 soldiers emerged in perfect formation. Tall, silver-armored, visors down. Their steps were inhumanly silent. At their head walked Nira. Her features were sharper than Lyra's, her long ears more rigid, her expression carved in cold stone. She halted just inside the perimeter, her eyes sweeping the scene. First the wreckage, then her sister, then the human in restraints. Her voice was level when she spoke. Lyra, you are alive. Lyra gave a short nod. Recovered. I activated the beacon yesterday. You were expected alone. Situations changed. Nira's gaze flicked to Elias, who met it with a tired, unflinching stare. Explain, she said. Lyra stepped forward, and her voice no longer trembled. He rescued me from the wreckage, treated my wounds, hid me from drones, saved my life, twice. Nira blinked. And what does he want in return? Nothing. He refused to leave me behind, even when I ordered him to. The soldiers shifted subtly. A murmur of uncertainty passed between them, silent yet present. He is human, Nira said finally. He is alive, Lyra countered. And not our enemy, not today. Nira's eyes narrowed. That's not your decision. I outrank you in field protocol now, Lyra said. This is my op, and my testimony is enough to grant him protected custody. A long silence followed. Wind rustled through the leaves. The glow of the ship pulsed in rhythm with the tension. Then Elias cleared his throat. Not to interrupt the sisterly death glare session, but these shackles are really chafing. Nira stared at him like one might regard a malfunctioning toaster that had spoken. But it was enough to break the deadlock. She turned away. Unbind him, escort both aboard. They'll answer to command together. The soldiers moved, unlocking their restraints. Elias stood slowly, rubbing his wrists. He gave Lyra a look, half gratitude, half disbelief. She didn't smile, but her eyes were softer. As they boarded the ship, the silence between them was not heavy. It was full. Elias leaned close, speaking low. So what now? They toss me in a cell until I learn to stop making jokes? Possibly, she said. Or you get assigned as a cultural liaison, or a lab specimen. Great. I've always wanted to be labeled Exhibit A, unexpected human. She looked at him. You already are. The ship rose, lifting them through layers of sky until the ground vanished in haze. Through the observation port, the planet below shrank, green, scarred, but still alive. Elias sat beside her, his hand resting close but not quite touching hers. You going to be okay with all this? I don't know, she said truthfully. My people won't understand what happened, how I survived, why I didn't leave you behind. They'll want to call you compromised. She turned to him. I am, and I'm not ashamed of it. He grinned. You're definitely more stubborn than you were when I found you. You were unconscious when you found me. Semantics. They sat together in silence as stars unfolded around them, bright specks in endless dark. Somewhere behind them, a war still burned. But in this moment, peace lived in the space between two former enemies who had chosen to trust. As the stars grew brighter, Lyra spoke once more, softly. You asked what I expected from a human. The answer used to be very little. And now? She looked at him. Now I know better.